Hello and welcome back, everyone, to The Road to Financial Freedom, a podcast that allows experts to share their stories and secrets to unlocking their financial independence. This podcast is brought to you by Camaplan, a self-directed IRA administrator in Ambler, Pennsylvania, that is focused on educating investors with different ways to grow their retirement savings faster through alternative investments. And once again, as I'm sure you know, we are recording this podcast episode remotely. I'm Jess Jones, Camaplan team member and podcast host. This week's guest is a classically trained musician who has traveled as a vagabond musician all over. After 13 years of performing, she found a new challenge in real estate and began as an individual investor with her first triplex in the Philadelphia area. And since then, her roles in the realm of real estate have expanded to include owner, property manager, and syndicator through her company, Hearthfire Holdings. The company has since turned to self-storage, growing their expanding portfolio of residential and commercial multifamily properties in the Philadelphia area. Please welcome Corinne Altimari to the podcast. Corinne, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm super excited to get to talk to you.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me.
Of course. So we talked about this before we all got on, but you and I both have music backgrounds, so I'm particularly interested in that. I'm interested in, just in general, your background too. If you could start by telling us a little bit more about where you grew up and where you were born, went to school, and how you got into studying music.
Absolutely. So I'm just outside of Philadelphia now, but I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and went to a performing arts high school, essentially, that I had to audition to get into. That was a little bit of a diversion from what I was doing up until that point. I went to private Catholic school and then wham, just went into public art school. That was definitely a culture shift.
Yeah.
But I absolutely loved, I was lucky enough to get in. I absolutely loved it. And that completely changed the trajectory of my life. I went to both undergrad and master school in music after making it through that high school program. And so it was music that ultimately brought me to Philadelphia for what was a one-season contract. And then while here, I started getting into real estate, met my now husband and business partner. And so Philadelphia has become home base. I'm not sure if that quite answered your question. I kind of just blazed through about 20 years of history there.
Well, it definitely does. I mean, I'm really interested in the fact, so you're coming from LA, you sign a contract and come to Philadelphia. What was that culture shift like? How, in terms of real estate even, how does it differ? I'm just curious.
The whole Philadelphia being a place of neighborhoods that shifts very dramatically block to block. That was a big change for me growing up in a nice, quiet little suburb outside of Los Angeles and then moving to Philly and having no idea. And so I lived in a basement apartment my first year. I moved here in October. We had 3 blizzards that year.
Wow.
I had black mold growing in our bathroom. The building that I was renting an apartment in was run by a husband-wife team. They were Eastern European of some sort. I want to say Ukrainian or something along those lines. So the English and the communication was very challenging. And things were perhaps not run as a professional property manager would. So when I looked into getting into real estate as an owner, as a property manager, I had been on the other side of things. And so I vowed that I would not be a slumlord, that I would treat my renters with the respect and the care that I had been looking for, especially coming to a new city. So that really informed how we set up our relationships and our business practices from a property management perspective, because I had that less than ideal first run. And I'm not saying it was any negative intent of those property owners. They were doing the best that they could, right? But coming into, having gone through that experience and then coming into real estate investing and property managing with a little bit more experience behind me and acumen, being able to just use the internet to Google everything that I didn't know in order to handle things appropriately, that all informed who I became and who I am today in as far as operating our business, interacting with our tenants in our multifamily buildings, and our day-to-day operations.
That's super interesting. I mean, I think in terms of every guest we've had on this podcast so far, I don't know if anybody's ever come from the perspective of, oh, I was a tenant in less than ideal situation in terms of, you're saying black mold, blizzards, things like that.
It doesn't work.
Yeah. Heat was broken down. So I think that's so interesting. The fact that, you were learning from your own experience, but you didn't even realize it maybe just yet at the time. These are things I'm not going to do, or this is how I'm going to model my own business as a property manager, things like that. So, I think that that's super interesting. I was just thinking about it when you were saying it. I was like, I don't think anybody so far on this podcast has said, oh, I was a tenant and that's how I got into multifamily, when I got into multifamily investing, I had some experience behind it, because I feel like now with a lot of people my age are moving to different cities, and everybody I graduated with, almost everybody moved to New York and are living in pretty similar conditions. And now with a pandemic happening, you're confined to that place for 6 months at least right now. So I think that that's just very interesting. So many people, especially our listeners right now, will probably be people who might be living in their first apartment or things like that. So I think that's a cool perspective for people to take on.
The great thing about real estate is that, or at least our role in real estate, is that we're serving so many different roles. So we're serving our investors and our other property owners. We're serving our employees or our subcontractors who are looking for good work and some accountability there. And then at the end of the day, we're, of course, serving the people who are living in our homes. And so maintaining that perspective throughout the course of the day, depending on what comes up or who we're interacting with, there are so many demands from that perspective, but that's also where I'll say the returns, the being able to see how you're impacting people's lives, right? So providing good quality homes to people. And in real estate, things are going to go wrong. You're going to get leaks around your windows. You're going to get plumbing back up. Stuff is going to happen. It's a physical asset. It deteriorates over time. It needs to be maintained. We maintain it as best we possibly can, but we are not all knowing, and we can't solve for every problem absolutely before it begins. So it's just a matter of maintaining that communication and those relationships and that honesty throughout all of our relationships. So our residents know that we have their best interests at heart. Our investors and our property owners know that we're not going to upcharge them for repairs that don't need to be fixed, but we are going to be proactive and advise on what needs to be kept an eye on, or what's possibly nearing the end of its usable life, or just being realistic about proactive repairs and maintenance. And the same with our vendors. They know that we have enough on our plates that they're going to be busy working with us. So it's kind of a trifold service industry from that perspective, but from all three fronts, we try to maintain as much humanity and honesty across the board.
Yeah, definitely. And I know just even from personal experience, I lived in an apartment right in Philadelphia, right out of college. Mm-hmm. And you remember those first apartments, you remember those experiences that you were living in. And I had a great property manager who was similarly to you, just very upfront, honest, human. We had mice for the first time ever in that apartment, from what she was telling me, and she just was like on top of it. So those sorts of things, I remember the mice, but I remember how great and communicative my landlord was and things like that. So I think what you're saying in terms of, it's a community and you have to communicate with your community and maintain strong relationships. I think that makes a ton of sense. So I am interested in, and I want to talk more about some of those early lessons you may have learned, or, things that you abide by now in terms of your rules as an investor or as a syndicator. But what are some more, did you have any epiphanies later on in your life, or any early lessons that you learned in your music career, Corinne, that have extended since as your career as an investor and as a multifamily property owner?
I think really the biggest one, and this is for me, right? Everyone's journey is going to be different, but the biggest one for me, I started out in music, singing in choir in church. And that has been a consistent. I made a detour into opera, and as a young artist and as a soloist, but singing with community has always been the one constant throughout my musical journey, throughout my life. And so what I'm finding as as we go further into real estate investing at scale, so at larger syndications, we of course started out individually just doing one property, owned myself individually, learning the ropes, making the mistakes there, and cutting my teeth with my own financial risk before starting to go into syndications and pooling together our resources into larger projects. What I'm finding as we go up into larger scale projects is that the journey and the making projects together and sharing in that journey is so much more rewarding than when you're doing it just by yourself.
Yeah.
So you can draw that correlation there. For me, that tracks back to how much I enjoy making music in a choir and with other people, breathing together, making something that's larger as a whole than each of us individually. And that's the opportunity that we have and that we are continuing to pursue through syndicating larger projects, such as our self-storage facility, which has 16 investors. And that was certainly the largest project that we did to date. It was a little over $2 million buy, where we started with first, with just triplexes and quads. So that was a big step up for us. But being able to accomplish things really together and to see that impact at a larger scale now, our reach is growing a little bit further. So that would be, I guess, an epiphany tracking from my music into real estate. Also drawing upon my opera career, being able to, in each scenario that I'm in, given day to day, because I wear many hats still. So being able to judge in any given scenario or situation, okay, what role do I need to play right now? Am I having a conversation with a vendor who maybe didn't do as good of a job as he should have, and I need to be the heavy for a minute? I need to be the bad guy? Or am I dealing with a tenant who is really disappointed in one thing or another that's not quite perfect when they moved in? So am I being a kind of conciliatory, more of a intermediary there, trying to make sure that they're being heard, that I'm capturing all of their feedback and then passing it along or getting things implemented to get it fixed. So having that awareness of throughout the day, being aware of who I need to be in that moment, who the person on the other side of the phone or it's usually on the other side of the phone or on the other side of my email inbox nowadays, because there's less face-to-face right now,
right,
who that person needs me to be in that moment. And I don't see that as being so changeable that I'm not being honest with that person. I think it's just acknowledging what that person needs from the other side of the phone in that moment to feel as if they are being heard and being acknowledged for what they need right there in that moment. And then me being able to adjust my reaction or how I communicate with them based on what's going on in that individual situation. Does that make sense? Like, that goes back to my acting and training. And it's not as if I'm pretending to be a different person. I think it's just acknowledging in that moment what needs to be most accomplished and how best to communicate and in order to accomplish that.
It makes total sense. And honestly, it comes as a bit of a relief to hear that someone else who is now in the real estate world has that background and has that experience of, I always feel like it's not lying or it's not untruthful, but it is this bit of this adaptability that I have to be able to kind of bounce around in different roles or adjust just in the slightest way to meet somebody at their status or at their level of emotion or things like that. So I personally relate to it big time, but I think for a lot of folks that are my age who maybe, either come from this background or come from communications major and they're trying to figure out what to do with it, and they decide that they want to start getting involved in real estate, like those sorts of things. I think that adaptability is what you are describing in terms of just communicating with other people. And I think it's a huge trait that goes underrated. And I think it also makes you an easy person that people want to work with.
I mean, thankfully there is science out there that will support, whether it's DISC profile or knowing people's Myers-Briggs or just being able to read people so that you know where they are, either on a DISC assessment or whatnot, so you know how to craft the message so that they best hear it. So there's a little bit of science behind it, which helps me feel slightly less disingenuous at the end of the day.
Same. I mean, you said Myers-Briggs. I have a friend who is very into Myers-Briggs and will tell you like right away, oh, you're not compatible with that person. They're this and you're INFJ or whatever. And that's what I am. But I'm so fascinated by that stuff. I think that that science does check out in a lot of ways, especially in like an office setting and in a business setting. So I totally get it. Like what you're saying makes perfect sense. And it also is kind of how I conduct myself too. So it's kind of nice to hear that someone else in this world does that. So thank you for sharing that.
You are welcome.
Of course. So in terms of how you made your transition over from music to IT management and then to multifamily real estate investing, can you talk a little bit more on that? I know you've touched on it, but what was that experience like? What was the moment where you decided, okay, well, this is something I'm going to turn into a career now in terms of making that transition over? And do you still balance music too with what you're doing?
Yeah, I'm still pinching myself that this is my career. So it was a shift for sure. My parents are both entrepreneurs as well. My father had a private law practice. My mother ran a Montessori preschool. So I had exposure from very, very early on about, I guess you would say, just that lifestyle and doing your own thing, right? Not necessarily, I mean, they both went into the office, but working for themselves. And so when I went into music and it started to appear that I was going to be pursuing that really for my life, I had also grown up around the family business. And that meant as a child working in my father's law office. My mother also managed some of their real estate investments. They had a small portfolio of apartments. And so I have very early memories of going with my mother to the properties, steam cleaning the curtains that were up on the windows, doing weeding and things around the yard, around the property. So the switch from music to IT and then into real estate investing, the IT project management was really a very, very lucky outcome of me spending significant amount of time running my father's law office. So I went to undergrad and I did live near campus, but then I was one of those kids that moved back home after college. I took a year off. Long story short, the school that I originally was going to go to, situations changed with my scholarship. And so instead of getting myself into debt, I decided to take a year off, move home, work full time with my father. It happened to work out perfectly because his paralegal was looking for something else at the time. So I stepped right into that full time for a year, saved massive amounts of money on rent and just banked all that money. And then was able to get my master's degree without any debt. So getting back to how I went from music to IT project management. So I had a decent resume as a paralegal working in a law office. And it was that resume with different headhunters when I made the shift from LA to Philadelphia that landed me my IT project management job. It wasn't a direct correlation, but I jumped in and made it work and worked with some really fantastic people. And then as soon as I was a W-2 employee, my dad and I spoke and he said, now you need to take those W-2s to the bank, get pre-qualified for a loan and buy your first investment property so that when you're tired of that job, when you want to get back full-time to music, you can. You have a financial windfall, you have a cash flowing property that will give you a little bit of passive income so that you can pursue your artistic endeavors, because we all know that arts very, very rarely pays the bills.
Yeah.
So that was my journey.
Definitely. Well, that's really interesting. I mean, I think that as someone who, right after I moved, I got a job in Philadelphia right after college, moved out there. I was lucky enough to be able to be affording my apartment and then moved back home and gained a bunch of experience that actually landed me Camaplan eventually in a weird series of ways. So what you're describing makes a ton of sense for people too. Like you said, everybody's journey is going to be different. So, I worked in a dog treat bakery out of a woman's basement and just from there learned how to, conduct myself in in in-person transactions and things like that, and helped build her inventory and helped understand what she was doing as this self-made businesswoman. And from there, started working at Camaplan, and I've been fortunate enough to get to talk to a lot of people like yourself who are describing very similar things and similar ways that they found entrepreneurship, but also just their own different unique stories too. So, I mean, I think that it's super interesting that your experience has kind of lended itself to one thing after another, and you are still planning ahead for the future and planning to be potentially go back to music full-time or part-time, whatever you decide to do, but at least you're giving yourself the cushion to do it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't think I answered that question. So I am still singing. We actually just started back with COVID and everything. So there are I'm singing in a church choir, and that's it. And that is enough for me. There's no way I can fit opera in my life right now. And that's fine. I'm perfectly happy that it is something that I can do, and it fulfills a part of me that is not otherwise fulfilled. But so we did just start back, the 8 of us. There are 8 of us core paid singers for this church that I sing with. And then the rest of the community choir join us on Zoom. But the 8 of us are getting together in the choir room and in the church, which thankfully is very large. It allows for tons of social distancing. So we're trying to figure out how to make music at distance. We're still toying around with that, but they make special masks for singers. I don't know if you've seen it, but for Broadway and whatnot. So there's specially configured masks that we wear. And so this is, let's see, in a couple of days will be our week 3 of doing it. So it's still new, but we did start back up, and we'll see how it goes. Keep all the fingers and toes crossed.
Yeah.
But yes, it was seemed to be non-linear moves throughout life of how I got from there to here. But I'm finding that it all does inform who I am today and how I conduct myself in day to day. So there's that. I do enjoy talking about it because people come to real estate investing from all sorts of backgrounds. And I like being able to talk about mine because it's not necessarily what you would expect. And I hope that it's inspiring maybe for anyone who might be on the sidelines trying to think about getting into real estate investing, but not really knowing where or how to begin, or if they're qualified or feeling unqualified. I mean, the great thing about real estate is there's so many ways to be involved in investing, whether it's as a passive investor, an active or a private money lender, or if you are great with project management, managing contractors, or all of the kind of intermediary relations sorts of roles, whether it's between investors and general partners and syndicators, or whether it's between an asset manager and the residents, being somewhere in between in the property management. There's so many different roles that need to be played and played well. So if any of your listeners are on the sidelines or not knowing where to begin, I just like to throw that out there as encouragement that there are plenty of ways to be involved, and just being able to identify what your key strengths are, what you are the best at, or what you bring to the table that's different, and then finding other people in the space that you would make a good partner with, or that you would work well with. You don't have to do it all on your own. I think that's ultimately the most inspiring isn't the right word. I think that's the most encouraging bit, that you don't have to have all the answers to all the parts. It is very much a team player game. And it's just a matter of identifying the other people that are in your networks, that are in the space that you want to be in, connecting with them and making a go of it all together.
I love that. And I think for a lot of people, especially for investors, collaboration, to not use a cliche, but collaboration is key. And I think that knowing that you don't have to do something alone, you don't have to educate yourself alone. There's so many networks out there now where you can go and educate yourself, meet other people, meet other investors, is a great takeaway from this episode, especially. So thank you for sharing that. So how did you get involved in self-storage then? Or how did self-storage come up after you've been investing in, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've been investing in multifamily real estate investments and then got involved in self-storage?
Yes. So we we were attempting to grow. We were in this space of small multifamily for 4 years, and we were doing really good at it. Not to toot our own horn or anything like that, but we were doing really well at it.
Yeah.
We wanted to grow. We wanted to get bigger. We were attempting to get into the larger multifamily space, and we're not making any headway. Just we had investor money behind us. We had cash ready to do the deals, but I'm just being completely honest here. But couldn't get commercial brokers to respond to us. We weren't either in the right network, or I didn't have enough people in my network at that point to kind of break through that initial, I don't know you, so I'm not going to respond to your phone calls or emails, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does, definitely.
So we just kept hitting closed doors and getting frustrated with it. So I don't remember where initially we heard about self-storage, but started reading more about it and learning more about it. And we're like, well, you know what? We're 2016, 2017. We were at the really height of an overextended market. We were starting to look at how we could position ourselves to be prepared for the upcoming recession, because real estate comes in cycles. We knew that there was a down cycle coming. Self-storage is very widely broadcast as a recession-resistant asset class. So we started learning about it. We love coming from people who are hands-on managers. We love that the lower costs that you have with self-storage. It's a much simpler physical structure. The maintenance and repairs, it's much lower number and ratio to your bottom line than what we knew with multifamily, even with us running things pretty tightly. And also the opportunities with self-storage. Self-storage is real estate, and it is also a business. And so everything that we had developed those, call it 5 years by that point, when we were really actively making offers on self-storage, everything that we had learned within that time with optimizing our property management and our syndication business, we saw correlations to what we could do in self-storage. And so it really ticked off a number of boxes for us. We were very clear on the fact that technology is one of our core competencies. My husband and business partner, Sergio, has 20 years in tech. He is a true IT. He's the ones and zeros, and I'm language and arts and kind of the fluffy stuff. So we're a great partnership from that perspective. So bringing all of the technology to our operations in property management and syndication, self-storage also has a huge opportunity there, because it is still a business that largely the majority of the market is operated by independent operators, mom and pops, who may or may not have adopted all of the opportunities that technology offers us now. So we really zeroed in on identifying an acquisition that was lacking in technology adoption and that was lacking in business operations and business management, because we were both coming from a background in IT and in corporate. I had 5 years in project management at this point, so I had developed a whole other arsenal of tools and knowledge. And so we really keyed in on acquiring not only self-storage real estate, but self-storage businesses that weren't being run as effectively as they could with modern tools and modern approaches. And so we did successfully acquire a facility just a little over a year ago now, and absolutely loved it, have really loved our experience with it so far. We've been able to achieve in year one what we had estimated out to accomplish by year two. We have been able to return to our investors what our projections were. We've accomplished quite a deal of projects, because it was a business and a property that was needing improvements from a whole variety of perspectives. So it's been a very full and busy year. So that's how we came to self-storage. Wasn't that a short answer?
No, that's perfect. I mean, I think that gives people a lot you cite a ton of things that you learned and things that have been successful, and you kind of are describing, you were getting you weren't letting yourself get completely knocked down by the fact that, people weren't responding and this and that in the multifamily circuit. It was, okay, well, now what do we do? Where do we take the skills that we've acquired and seek out a new opportunity? And it was a successful new opportunity that you sought out. So I think people need to hear success stories as much as they need to hear the lessons learned.
Yeah,
definitely. So at what point was Hearthfire Holdings established? At what point in your journey did you and your husband found that together? And what does Hearthfire Holdings do? I want to talk some more about what your company does and who a typical client is.
Sure. So I bought the first property in 2012. I'd say month 2 of that, we founded Hearthfire Holdings.
Cool.
Because I didn't want to be knocking on people's doors and collecting rent checks personally. So While I acquired the property personally and the first set of tenants knew that I was the owner, we very quickly stood up the business entity just to give a little bit of a layer of protection for myself personally, and to give a more finished business presentation to our tenants, just so that we could set expectations for professional interactions and making sure that I wasn't getting text messages at all hours of the evenings, just setting the baseline for interactions between ourselves and our residents. So I would say, probably within those first few months of that first acquisition, we did everything backwards, my husband and I. So when we started dating, I was hunting for the property. So all of our date nights were touring properties that were borderline. I mean, they weren't terrible, but I couldn't afford, to buy a top of the line Class A property. So we were in some interesting neighborhoods. And so that was all of our date nights, and then successfully closed on the property, and one of the units needed to be fixed up. So we were hands-on in there doing those renos. And then about 7 months later, we bought another property together. And so we had the business and we bought the property together, and then we started syndicating, and then we bought our home and got married. So we did everything completely backwards from a professional perspective, but from a personal perspective. So that's Hearthfire a little bit. And then what we do essentially, if I haven't clearly enough articulated it till now, is we are really passionate about sharing the benefits of real estate investing. So first and foremost, we try to educate everyone that we know about the opportunity that real estate presents. And then we also pool together investors to acquire properties that they perhaps would not have been able to get into on their own. Reflecting back to our experience trying to get into the larger multifamily space and getting door after door after door just remained shut on us, we're stronger all together. So as a larger group, we're able to achieve more, get to more deals, accomplish more altogether than we would individually. We're also pooling our resources that way. We're also minimizing risk, where our limited in our passive investors, who are limited partners in every deal, are only exposed to the amount that they have originally invested. And the way that we structure the deals is that we serve as general partner. We find the deal, we pull together the entity who's ultimately going to acquire it. We stay on board as asset managers. We always invest personally ourselves as well, because we feel that it is very important for our investors to know that we are fully in it with them, not just wanting to pull together a deal and get our syndicator acquisition fees, but that we are in it for the long haul and the overall best returns of the project as well. And then we also do the asset management and day-to-day property management. Some of our other clients are individual investors, and they have a small portfolio of individual properties in and around our market. Some people find, because Sergio is also a licensed realtor, so we do have some within our portfolio who originally find him as an agent, and he goes through the whole process with them of first-time investors finding that right first investment, just like for me, that first triplex, making sure that it checked off what I could do at that point in my life
Right.
and was everything that I could accomplish. So shepherding those investors through that journey, and then staying on, assuming that they are happy with the service that they get from him as an agent, which, knock on wood, so far he's been doing very well. They trust us enough by that point to entrust their investment with us for the ongoing management. So a variety of roles there, but essentially syndication and management of properties.
Great. So, I mean, I think it's incredible that you have touched on the fact that, a lot of your investors are, there are some individual investors that invest with Hearthfire, but you're also creating an opportunity for newer investors who want to get some skin in the game. And I think that is wonderful, especially because I think, a lot of people, like you were just saying, people who may be on the sidelines who don't really know how they can start getting involved. Would you say that, looking for opportunities like Hearthfire is a good way for new investors to start getting involved, or at least start looking at ways to learn a little bit more about how to invest in terms of investing with others who may be more experienced?
We will be transparent to a fault. So I would say by all means, feel free to use us as a resource. Sergio writes for Bigger Pockets. So if any of your listeners don't know about Bigger Pockets, you should just check it out. And he's written a few articles on there where he's pretty vulnerable and honest about our journey from a personal and professional perspective. That's just who we are. And we might not have all the answers, and we might not have the perfect deal, because each investor is looking for something specific to their scenario.
Right.
So I'm not going to try to sell you on a self-storage deal if you're really looking to just get started in single family, because that's your comfort range. That's fine. That's fine. And if what you're looking for isn't necessarily in our wheelhouse, I can certainly recommend you someone within our network who I trust, who I believe would take good care of you. That's something that we've been working on, expanding our network and connecting more and more with like-minded individuals in this space, because I know now, and I can acknowledge that was a shortcoming when we first started. I was so in the weeds and just trying to survive and getting through my day job, and also making sure that my rentals were being managed. I wasn't networking enough. I just didn't make the time for it. I didn't realize the value in it. And I think we've come through that and are now in a different phase where we make the time for it to connect with people who are better than us, who are further along in their journey than we are. Mm-hmm. And it's helping us to grow. It's helping us speed up our development by being surrounded by people who are better and stronger and faster than us. And so it also makes me able to refer people. If I don't have the answers, I'm not going to make one up. I'm going to just pass it along to someone who does, because that's, at the end of the day, that's better for everyone.
Absolutely. I think transparency is such a huge benefit to figuring out who you want to invest with. So, I mean, I know I would appreciate it. So I'm sure a lot of listeners will definitely feel the same way. It's actually interesting that you touch on networking, because that was a question I did want to ask. I know you've brought up a couple of things that have been successful, a couple that have made you successful as an investor and have made you successful in, just growing your experience and finding new opportunities. What do you think are some characteristics to a successful investor, or even to characteristics that you look for in successful partners or potential investors that you take on, or even characteristics that have worked in your business relationship with your husband? I'm just interested in, what are some things that have stood out to you over the years in terms of, this is a great trait that I have that helps me conduct business, or this is a great trait that someone else has that I want to take on more for myself.
Number one, I would say for any entrepreneur is resiliency, and just being able to persevere through the downtimes, through the mistakes, through the surprises, being able to get back up, taking your bumps and learning from them. That's definitely number one. In tandem with that, I would say is creativity and being able and creativity and adaptability, being able to adjust we make plans and God laughs. So
Yep. Look at this whole year. Look at
yes. Being able to resurvey your landscape and try something else. I think that has been key in our journey, because when we started, we were pretty solidly convinced that we were long-term buy and hold multifamily investors.
Right.
And here we are where that's not the case at all. And we're continuing to change and evolve. So I would say those are two key characteristics. For me also is integrity, and just being able to trust the person that I'm working with, and that what I'm getting is the honest truth. And whether or not that's pretty, just being able to know that I can trust you. I think at the end of the day, that's the most important thing. Definitely.
And I mean, I think those are all incredible things to look out for, especially in yourself and in other people that you're investing with. Do you see, in terms of, and I almost just lost my thought, but I just grabbed it again. Do you see any clients we're a self-directed IRA custodian. Do you see any clients or investors come to you with new types of ideas that you have to brush up on education-wise, in terms of, do any of your investors invest through self-directed IRAs or through self-directed means? And how was that a learning experience for you or them, or is that something you had to adapt to?
That was something that I knew about, thankfully. We have educated our investors on it because we have many of our customers, many of our investors are happily working their day jobs, their careers, and they're looking for real estate as another avenue. So they have 401ks, but they don't really think about it, and they don't necessarily, because we're not educated about these kinds of things in mainstream educational avenues. And don't get me started on that. That's another topic.
I know.
So we do a fair amount of exposing our investors or our potential investors to all of the options that they might have at their fingertips. And so I know that I have referred Camaplan for our project last year. I was sending to interested investors who said, well, we have, a 401k, or we have these sorts of funds. Is there any way that we can tap into those to come into a deal? And so we have provided referrals and references to people who maybe just simply are not aware of that. So we do pass that. That all comes in as part and parcel of the overall financial education that we also try to provide to people that come across our paths. Whether or not we end up working with them, there's just so much out there that is not part of mainstream education, financial education, and literacy. So we do try to pass those sorts of things along about self-directeds, because I think that's a massive, massive source of wealth and opportunity for, call it the standard, right, 9 to 5, or the working millions. So we do pass that information along as well.
Yep, that's absolutely awesome. Yeah, and because we're a neutral third party, we're same as what you're describing too. We focus primarily on educating investors that this is an option that they have. They don't necessarily have to go with us. We don't provide any investments or, sell anything or promote anything. One of our big pushes is education and being able to inform investors that, this is an option that you have, because like you're saying, it's not something that people are totally financially literate in. So I think that the approach that you take in terms of, we're being transparent, we're telling you this is an option, you don't have to go with it, but this is something that you can look at, as something that Hearthfire and Kama share and have in common. So I think that that's really incredible. One question that I do have in terms of, and you touched on both your parents having been entrepreneurs, were there any other early influences in your life, or is there anything now that you currently use as a tool or resource that you use to keep up with your knowledge of investing? Is there anything that you started to, either in the beginning of your real estate investing process in terms of resources looked at, that you still look at today, or has that grown and changed in terms of how you educated yourself, I guess is my question. What were some of the things that helped you build your knowledge of investing?
Rich Dad Poor Dad was definitely the start, and having parents that were entrepreneurs and in real estate from a very early age, I just was around a lot of that. So that was the foundational start. And then nowadays, given where we are in what seems to be a continually shifting landscape, I am signed up for every single newsletter under the sun. And and they all come into a specific folder in my email inbox, and I have time boxed a set of hours once a week where I just go through all that, because otherwise I could probably be spending all my work days just reading through newsletters. So just staying up to date with industry publications, whether it's the Pennsylvania Self-Storage Association or various other self-storage operators or brokerages, commercial lenders, financial resources that kind of run the gamut there, or even marketing firms that just do a really good job of pulling together information from a variety of different resources in real estate. That's how I handle staying on top of current news updates, things. That's how I approach it. I just have everything go into one folder in my inbox, and then I have time boxed once a week to review all that and make sure that I'm staying on top of trends or updates or things like that. So I hope that's a decent enough answer.
No, it's a perfect answer. And I think, especially right now, it's pretty smart to keep your finger on the pulse of at least what's happening in terms of finances all over the world and everything like that. So I know, I use social media to keep up on news. So maybe I should start taking up what you're looking at.
I mean, what you could do if you find yourself clicking on specific headlines, specific resources in social media, everybody's got a weekly or a monthly newsletter or things like that. I find that just helps me control my time a little bit better and my focus. We also talked about Myers-Briggs and relating to people. So I did want to mention, I read a book recently, complete opposite of that, but it's called Personality Isn't Permanent by Ben Hardy. And it kind of bucks the trend of, if you're an ENFP, then you're going to be like this. It challenged me to revisit certain maybe excuses that I fall back upon to say, I'm an introvert, so I'm not going to do that. And instead he challenges that, okay, we can acknowledge that we might have some baseline tendencies, but we also have the opportunity to take those tendencies and make the most of them and maybe challenge ourselves to grow beyond that. So I wanted to give a shout out to that book because that gave me some hard thinking. And would encourage your listeners to take a look into it as well.
I just wrote it down. It's Personality Isn't Permanent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I am very interested in reading that. I'm curious, what is your Myers-Briggs, Corinne?
INTJ.
Oh, I'm an INFJ. So we we have some overlap there. I think that's why I'm hearing a lot of what you're saying. Like, I can relate. So that's awesome.
Yep.
I really am interested in reading that book. I think what you're saying too speaks to the fact that interpersonal relationships are just as important in terms of investing as anything else really is. Having a know-how of money markets and things like that is important. But also you touched on the fact, your husband does the numbers and things, but you handle the more creative, wordy, quote unquote, fluffy side of things that makes it, I don't know. I think that it is an underrated tool that investors sometimes take for granted. Like if you have a great personality, use it. But people do. They just don't realize maybe that they have the tools within that personality to grow their business better.
Yep, absolutely. And however it best meets their goals. You don't have to be everything to everyone in this. You just have to find the people that best complement you and that have shared vision, or that you can work towards a shared vision with. And accomplishing that together at the end of the day is so much more rewarding than being alone at the end of the day. That was fundamentally for me what made it easy for me to step away from music was that I was traveling and I made great friends in the different shows and productions and programs that I did. But at the end of the day, I was going back to a hotel room alone or an apartment alone. The people that I loved most in the world weren't there and weren't experiencing it with me. And that's great for a while to have those experiences. But then at the end of the day, you want to be able to share it, or at least I do.
Oh, definitely. I completely agree. And that's going back to the book, the fact that, introverts, the idea that, introverts don't want to interact with other people and need that. We do need that social recharge, but I definitely feel that way too. It's like, I want to be able to come home and share stories with other people, share successes with other people, and not necessarily successes, some things that may have frustrated me or a lesson I learned that day.
Yes, being able to come home and have that verbal vomit and just be like,
Sometimes you just need a rant. I know I lived with a roommate my first year in that apartment that I talked about with the mice, and the mice were not the roommates, but I lived with a roommate and she worked during the day. I worked at night, but she would go home a lot. She had the ability to go home because she didn't work nights. And I worked in house management and in theater. So I was working nights. I would come home and a lot of the time she would have traveled back to Long Island or things like that. And I just remember missing that so much. But I was learning a ton of things that I think I took with me in terms of how I conduct myself in an office or in business from that experience that I just wasn't able to share with somebody. And I wish I was able to share that. So I think it all ties back into what you were saying before, collaboration and working with others. I think there's more of a desire for that, at least for me. And I think if others are listening and relating to that idea that we both have, that, solitary success is great. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes it's best to do it with others. I think that that'll resonate with a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. And particularly for any of your listeners who are female, I did want to give a shout out to the Real Estate Invest Her community, which is all about empowering women in real estate. I discovered Liz and Andressa, the co-founders, I want to say maybe a year and a half ago now, and I had our daughter at home, and I distinctly remember dragging myself out of the house to go to an in-person meetup back in the day when we had in-person meetups.
Seems like years ago, Corinne.
It seems like forever ago.
And I don't remember what other people look like.
It was such a big step for me because that was my first time getting out of the house, getting away from baby and going out. And it was going into a room full of women who are also in real estate and sharing their wisdom. And I want to give a shout out to that community for any of your listeners who are female and considering real estate. The Real Estate Invest Her community. Definitely, I have to give acknowledgement because plugging into that community and the women there and they're all about encouraging and empowering. There's no competitiveness, it's connectedness. And that getting involved in that community was just a game changer for me from an inspiration and just reinvigoration sort of perspective. So I need to give them a shout out. They're even self-publishing a book. So they are on fire. The Only Woman in the Room is the book, and it's coming out, I think, later this week. So for any of your listeners that are women, that's my one shameless plug, but I'm not ashamed at all about it just because of the change that me just being involved in that community and being exposed to the other women and all of the fantastic things that they're doing in real estate. That's it. I'm going to stop there.
No, definitely. I mean, Liz was the one who connected us, and I'm so glad that she did. We had her on a few weeks ago or a month ago. Time isn't even real anymore, but we had her on a bit ago, and I found what she said about being a woman, and I've recently joined the investor community on Facebook and everything too. Mm-hmm. Being a woman in this business is not necessarily contingent on or built around the setbacks that you'll experience, but the inspiration that you can find from your personal ability and the ability of those around you and the network that you can build of those around you, because that network is an incredible, non-competitive, uplifting group of women. So I mean, I will also shamelessly plug away with you. So I think that that's incredible. I mean, I think that that's great that even at this point you've been an established investor for some time. Hearthfire Holdings is up and running. A year ago, you found this community and you learned some more about yourself and you learned some more about others that that's still able to allow you to grow a little bit more as an investor. So, I think that that's great. And would you say that for any, listeners, especially those women listeners out there, seeking out those communities like that would be something that they should do early on? Or what do you think?
I would encourage it. I think I think some new or potential investors run the risk of analysis paralysis and thinking, okay, well, I need to spend 3 years reading all the books in real estate investing and self-educating and all of that before I can make a first step in to actually do. And yes, it is very important to educate yourself. You're not ever going to learn as much as what you learn once you're actually in a deal and hands-on doing it. So it's a fine line of spending the time to make sure you have the requisite knowledge to then do. But I definitely encourage listeners, even if you're not actively in real estate investing, it's certainly worth tapping into. Not only for the knowledge, but also just for you'll probably get thrown some nuggets of thoughts or approaches or strategies that maybe were not on your radar. So as I've been talking about how networking has really amped up our game or forced us to amp up our game or really like speed tracked our knowledge and our growth, it'll do the same, whether it's this network or any others. There's so many now online that are available. I strongly encourage people to tap into that. And it doesn't have to be something that you pay thousands or tens of thousands of dollars for a weekend with a guru.
Right.
The real estate investor community is free. There are people there that are just giving of their time and knowledge because we've all been through the ropes and we want to spare anyone else some of those very painful early lessons learned. There's a balance of making sure that you're not overly asking for people to give too much of their time away for free without perhaps being able to provide something else back in return. So there has to be an awareness of that balance there. Mm-hmm. But whether it's the real estate investor or Bigger Pockets or any other of the many, many online communities or virtual summits or conferences going on, I strongly encourage people to make the time to make that a priority, because that will only really jumpstart your education and also more than likely open up your realm of consciousness from maybe beyond just what you know and get you thinking about things a little bit more creatively or from different angles and just opening up the opportunities that way.
Right. And plus, like you said, it kind of makes you feel nice to just have your thoughts or your ideas or your trajectory validated by a community of people that are there to lift you up and not try to get you ahead or leverage your opportunity for their own opportunity. I think it just, as human beings, I think validation just feels nice sometimes. So I think having a network of people,
it's great.
Having a network of people is great for that.
Who will lovingly check you every now and then.
Yeah. Exactly.
So I see some of those threads on the Facebook community every now and then.
Like, hey,
but it'll be said with grace.
Yeah.
And just from those of us who have maybe been through the ringer a couple more times, be like, well,
100%. Yeah. I think having that, it's a combination of like kindness and experience in that group and in a lot of these investor groups that will help you kind of inform your own strategies there. So thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Great. So, Corinne, the last few questions we touch on as we wind down are, and I think you've touched on a lot of these, but if you can just sum it up, we ask all of our guests this question: what would you say are your keys to building wealth, unlocking financial freedom? And it doesn't necessarily have to be financial, but what is something or some things, if you can sum it up in a few key points, the things that have informed the ways that you look at success?
Okay. So not financial at all, but defining success on your terms, absolutely on your terms.
Yeah.
For me, success is being able to go go and live the life that I want, whether it's here in Philadelphia or go away camping for a weekend, or we took our travel trailer down to Cape May for 6 weeks this summer and conducted our business fully remotely from there. So whatever success is for you, and being able to be crystal clear on your definitions of that. Forget everybody else. Forget social media. If you have a life partner, then ideally you would want to be in alignment with your life partner on those. So that will be my one caveat. But being crystal clear on your definition of success, because it looks different for all of us, and checking in on that regularly. My husband and I both, and we're accountability partners to one another. We've been starting journaling, at daily journaling. I would say this year and a half, really. Daily journaling, reflecting back on our goals and our criteria for the year, for the quarter, for the month, for the week, and every day tracking how we're measuring up to that, or if we need to recalibrate. Whether it's journaling or whether it's putting a sticky on your mirror in the bathroom or drawing with your lipstick on it or whatever, having your top criteria somewhere where you have an opportunity to check in with yourself on a regular basis and see how you're doing, and see if what your daily actions are really in alignment with what you say your big picture goal is. And if they aren't, then that's an opportunity for you to sit down with yourself and have some tough conversations or reevaluate your big picture goals.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Corinne. I'm just so happy that you were able to join us today. I think you not only have, like we were just saying, affirmed some of the things that I've been feeling, but I think you're providing a lot of young investors, a lot of women investors, a lot of new investors with some great tools to start looking at within themselves and within their growing community. So thank you so much for being here today. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks. So the last question I do have to ask before we go, how can people reach you? How can they get in touch with you? Do you have a website or any social media that our listeners can use to get in touch with you if they have more questions for you?
We do. We have all the things. Our website is hfireholdings.com. You can email me, Corinne, CORINN @hfireholdings.com. That'll be your best bet.
Great. Thank you again, Corinne. So happy to have you here today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. This was fun. I don't get to talk with other artists too terribly much, so this was fun.
I know, right? If we're ever able to see each other in person again, I got to come and see you perform or something, because I think I would just enjoy it very much.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Well, thank you again. Tune in everyone next week to hear more from our experts who have paved their roads to financial freedom, or you can call Camaplan today to learn more about how you can start taking control of your future wealth. Thank you, everyone.